He stepped into the grand hall wearing a faded gray t-shirt and beige slacks, simple clothes, clean but clearly out of place amid polished shoes and tailored suits. The marble floor echoed under his cautious steps. All eyes turned, one by one, scanning him like an anomaly. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Conversations stuttered and died. A man in a black suit with a gold tie smirked, gesturing broadly toward him. "Did the caterer get lost?" he asked, loud enough to draw a few quick laughs. Another voice added, "Maybe he's here to clean up after us." Elliot Marlowe didn't flinch. His hands calmly clutched the soft cotton of a cap he held against his chest, the kind a father might wear on the way to the hardware store. He glanced around the room, not with shame, but with quiet alertness. Still, his presence was like sandpaper against silk in that sea of luxury. The hall, adorned with crystal chandeliers and velvet curtains, was filled with an audience dressed for inheritance. Black dresses, diamond earrings, cufflinks worth more than some cars. They whispered, laughed, and pointed discreetly, their expressions dancing between amusement and disgust. Who was this man, and why was he here? "He's not family," muttered a woman in pearls, sipping her drink like she wished it were stronger. "Probably some charity case," another murmured, snapping a photo of Elliot and showing it to a friend, who chuckled while pretending not to. At the front of the room, standing near a large oak table where the will would be read, Caleb Whitmore, confident, charming, and cold, stepped forward, arms open like he was about to welcome a long-lost friend. "Sir," he said mockingly, "I believe the public seating is outside." The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was sharp, restrained, and collective. The kind of laughter people remember. Elliot didn't respond. He simply moved toward the back of the room and stood quietly near a window, his figure softened by the light pouring in. Outside, the mist clung to the trees beyond the estate, like a secret waiting to be revealed. To the others, he was invisible. To some, an eyesore, but to a few observant ones, the lawyer at the corner, the quiet woman by the fireplace, there was something else in him. Stillness, presence, a patience that didn't belong to someone desperate or foolish is the final. Guests arrived. The air thickened with expectation. The will was about to be read, and no one suspected what was coming. Least of all the people mocking him. What they didn't know was this: by the end of the day, everything they thought they owned would belong to the man they had just laughed at. Long before he ever stepped into that grand hall, Elliot Marlowe lived a life few would bother to notice. Not because it was insignificant, but because it lacked spectacle. He never sought applause. He never owned flashy cars or dined in places that required reservations. But he built something much more lasting. Step Forward, a foundation that would quietly change the lives of hundreds of forgotten children. Elliot grew up in a working-class neighborhood, the son of a mechanic and a part-time librarian. His clothes were hand-me-downs, but his spirit was first-hand. Even as a child, he was the one who stayed behind after school to help others read, who fixed broken toys instead of throwing them away. He didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened, not because his voice was loud, but because it was true. After earning a degree in special education, Elliot began teaching at an underfunded school on the outskirts of the city. It was there he met his greatest challenge and his greatest inspiration. A 12-year-old boy named Riley, born with cerebral palsy and abandoned by most of his family. Riley struggled with basic communication, and most teachers saw him as a burden. But Elliot saw potential. He spent hours designing custom tools to help Riley express himself, using music, rhythm, and movement. Within months, Riley was not only communicating, he was thriving. That success sparked something in Elliot. A question: what if more kids like Riley had this kind of chance? So he quit his job, sold his car, took out a small loan, and founded Step Forward in the back room of a borrowed community center. It started with 3 students, 1 volunteer, and Elliot himself, working 7 days a week, sometimes sleeping on a cot beside the bookshelves. Word spread, not fast, not loud, but steady. A mother would tell another mother. A teacher would whisper to a desperate parent. Slowly, the room became a haven. Elliot refused to charge for the programs, insisting it remain donation-based. He believed kindness should never have a price tag. Over the years, Step Forward evolved. Local businesses partnered with the foundation to offer training and jobs for neurodiverse youth. Therapists began volunteering their time. Graduates from the program went on to become baristas, artists, coders, contributors to society. Not just statistics. One of the most remarkable stories was that of Lenny, a teenager with severe anxiety who hadn't left his house in over a year. After 6 months at Step Forward, Lenny was not only going outside, he was mentoring others in the program. "Elliot didn't fix me," Lenny once said during a local news interview. "He reminded me I didn't need fixing." Yet Elliot never appeared on that interview. He declined the spotlight. He chose instead to work quietly, collecting moments, not praise. And that's how he met Leonard Whitmore. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Elliot first met Leonard Whitmore, though at the time, he had no idea who the man was. Elliot had just finished a workshop at a local youth center and was walking to the bus stop when he noticed an elderly man struggling to lift a toppled grocery bag from the sidewalk. Dozens of people walked by. Elliot didn't. He knelt down, gently gathered the scattered items, and helped the man to his feet. The man, dressed plainly but with a quiet authority, introduced himself only as Leo. Elliot offered to walk him home, and Leo accepted. The walk turned into a conversation. That conversation turned into a weekly routine. Every Thursday they met on a park bench with thermoses of coffee. Leo listened intently as Elliot spoke about his students, about his foundation, about his belief that the world didn't need more noise. It needed more people willing to act with quiet integrity. What Elliot didn't know was that Leonard Whitmore, billionaire real estate mogul and owner of half the city skyline, had spent the last 2 years disillusioned with his own family. He was surrounded by boardroom sharks and legacy-hungry relatives who saw him not as a man, but as a vault. Meeting Elliot was like breathing clean air after years of pollution. Leo never told Elliot who he really was, and Elliot never asked. Their friendship wasn't built on curiosity, but connection. One afternoon, Leo visited Step Forward in secret. He walked through its modest halls, watched as Elliot taught a group of teens how to navigate real-life interviews, offering tips not just on what to say, but how to believe in their worth. Leo stood in the back, unnoticed, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Later that night, Leo told his lawyer, "I've found the only man I trust with everything." Months passed. Then Leo's health declined, quietly, discreetly. Elliot was one of the few who noticed. He began checking in more often, bringing Leo soup, helping him manage appointments. He still didn't know the truth. To him, Leo was just a lonely old man with stories worth hearing. When Leonard Whitmore died, or so everyone thought, the world mourned a tycoon. Headlines ran obituaries with glossy photos and summaries of his empire. But Elliot didn't read them. He just sat on that park bench with 2 cups of coffee, waiting for a conversation that wouldn't come. What Elliot didn't know was that Leo had left behind more than a fortune. He had left behind a plan, and that plan was about to shake the very room now laughing at the man who once picked up his groceries. As the clock struck 10, a hush fell over the grand hall. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Mr. Armitage, stepped to the center, holding a thick envelope. The mood shifted from arrogance to anticipation. Every eye locked on the sealed will. Glasses clinked softly as people set down their champagne, ready to devour what they believed was their rightful feast. But in the back corner, Elliot stood still, almost blending into the light pouring through the tall windows. His presence, so quietly defiant, was beginning to unnerve a few. Then came the moment. Mr. Armitage cleared his throat. As per the final testament of Mr. Leonard Whitmore, all properties, shares, assets, intellectual property, and residual earnings are to be transferred to... He paused. Mr. Elliot Marlowe. The silence was absolute. Then chaos. Voices exploded. "Who?" shouted Caleb, his gold tie suddenly too tight. "This is a joke." "Impossible," murmured a woman, her pearls trembling with her indignation. "He's not even family," snapped another. Phones were pulled out. Legal terms were Googled. Someone began yelling for security. And in the middle of it all, Elliot stood motionless. Not from triumph, not from pride, but from disbelief. His eyes locked on the letter being held up by Mr. Armitage, the signature unmistakable. Leonard's handwriting. Leonard's words. Still he didn't move. That's when it happened, the moment that cracked his quiet calm. Someone sneered from across the room. "This has to be fraud. Look at him. He's not capable of running anything, let alone an empire." The jab wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. Elliot felt it like a slap, not to his ego, but to everything he'd built silently for others. His hands trembled slightly, still holding that old cap. His mind reeled, not from shock of inheritance, but from something deeper. Is it really worth it, he thought, to keep being good in a world that rewards cruelty, that applauds surface, that mocks silence? He remembered every moment he had spent helping others, the late nights writing grants, the tearful calls from parents, the hugs from students who finally felt seen. Yet here he was, surrounded by strangers who would rather burn the truth than believe it. And in that instant, a flicker of doubt pierced his heart. But then, a voice. "Mr. Marlowe?" came the soft tone of Mr. Armitage. "Would you care to speak?" Elliot blinked, once, then twice. Slowly, he walked to the front. The room parted, like it was allergic to humility. He reached the table, his steps steady now, his breath regaining rhythm. "I didn't come here for this," he began. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I didn't know Leonard left me anything. I came because he mattered." A silence fell, thicker this time. The lawyer nodded, then opened a side folder. Per Leonard Whitmore's instructions, supporting. "Documents are to be shown," he said, placing photographs, handwritten letters, and a USB stick on the table. One by one, the images revealed themselves on a monitor. Photos of Elliot and Leonard, in parks, at Elliot's foundation, laughing. Over coffee. A video clip played. Leonard speaking directly to the camera saying, "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And the man you've all ignored, he's the only one who stood by me when no one else did." The room shattered. The footage was simple, not polished, not scripted. Just Leonard, in a worn armchair, smiling in that quiet way only Elliot ever brought out in him. "I spent a lifetime building towers," Leonard's voice said through the speakers. "But in the final years, I met someone who reminded me that the tallest structures are built on kindness." Elliot never asked who I was, never asked for anything. He just showed up. For me, for others, for those the world forgot. People shifted in their seats. Some looked away. Caleb's mouth hung open, the color draining from his face. Clara, one of Leonard's young nieces, clutched her designer clutch like it could stop time. The lawyer continued, placing on the table a marriage certificate between Elliot and no one, a testament not of romance, but of trust. A signed transfer of assets, a journal filled with notes from Leonard about Step Forward, titled, "Where Hope Begins." One entry read, "This man is the only legacy worth leaving behind." The room felt different now, heavier, not with money, but with guilt. Caleb stood, trying to regain control. This isn't what Uncle Leonard would have wanted. We're his family." Mr. Armitage raised an eyebrow. "You're mentioned, Caleb. Would you like me to read what Leonard wrote about you?" Caleb hesitated. The lawyer opened the will to Caleb Whitmore. "I hope you one day learn that charm is not character. You mistook the stage for the substance. I leave you the same amount of kindness you showed others." "None." A few gasped. Someone stifled a laugh. Elliot didn't flinch. He was still trying to process it all. The weight of an empire placed into hands that had only ever wanted to hold others up. He looked out across the room. Some averted their eyes. Others stared, unsure whether to apologize or disappear. But then, from the back, a voice called out. It was Riley, now older, stronger, confident, wearing a button-down shirt and a step-forward pin. "You're wrong about him," he said, stepping into view. "Mr. Marlowe isn't just someone Leonard trusted. He's someone who changed lives, mine included." The room turned. "He believed in me when even my own family didn't," Riley continued. "Because of him, I'm working. I'm living. On my own. And I've mentored 6 kids just like me. So if you want to know what makes someone worthy of this inheritance, it's not blood. It's heart." A tear slid down Elliot's cheek, but he quickly wiped it with the back of his hand. The lawyer closed the folder, nodded to Riley, and turned to the crowd. "The will is final. The estate belongs to Mr. Elliot Marlowe." The silence was longer, uncomfortable. It was reverent. No one laughed now. The fallout began almost instantly. The moment the lawyer finished reading the final clause, Some attendees rose from their seats, red-faced and shaking, demanding explanations. Caleb stormed toward the front, waving his arms in protest. "This can't be legal. There must be another version of the will. Something updated." Mr. Armitage didn't flinch. "This is the latest version, notarized and sealed. There are multiple video statements, and all legal requirements have been satisfied. I suggest you sit down, Mr. Whitmore." But Caleb refused to listen. "You don't get to just hand over an empire to a nobody," he spat, glaring at Elliot. That's when Elliot, for the first time, raised his voice. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like glass. "You didn't care about Leonard. You cared about his money. That's the difference." The room went still again. "I never asked for this," Elliot continued. "I didn't even know Leonard had included me in anything, but I showed up today because he mattered to me, not what he had." Caleb opened his mouth to fire back, but the lawyer beat him to it. "If you continue this behavior, I'll be forced to ask security to escort you out." The threat worked. Caleb fell back, huffing, his entitlement wounded. The rest of the crowd remained silent, some in shame, others in shock, all realizing the roles had reversed. And Elliot, the man mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed, stood at the center, composed, steady, unshaken. He turned to face them. "You all wanted a piece of Leonard's legacy. But what you didn't realize is that his real legacy wasn't in money, or towers, or holdings. It was in the way he treated people, quietly, consistently, with decency." He paused, then added, "And that's something most of you failed to honor today." From the back of the room, Riley stepped forward again, joined by a handful of former Step Forward students and volunteers. Their presence wasn't planned, but powerful, a living testament to Elliot's impact. One of them, a girl named Amira with a visual impairment, spoke softly. "Mr. Marlowe taught me that being seen is different from being watched. Today you all watched him, judged him, but never saw him." Another boy, Lucas, nodded. "He gave me my first job. No one else even returned my calls." Their words didn't sting. They healed, not the audience, but the narrative. Because suddenly, Elliot was no longer the outsider. He was the anchor. As emotions shifted in the room, one elderly woman, Leonard's sister who hadn't spoken until now, stood up slowly. "I remember when Leonard first spoke about a man he met in the park," she said, voice cracking. "He said, 'This one's different. This one listens.' I thought he was being poetic. Now I understand." She turned to Elliot, offering a respectful nod. "Thank you for being there for him when we weren't." Elliot gave a quiet nod. In return, his face unreadable but his eyes full. As the murmurs softened and the weight of truth settled, Elliot stepped forward again. This time, not to defend himself, but to deliver a decision that no one expected. "I'm not going to sell the properties," he said calmly, "and I'm not moving into the estate." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I'm going to turn it into something Leonard and I dreamed about," he continued. "A center for development, therapy, and mentorship for kids like the ones that step forward, and families who can't afford what they deserve." Even Mr. Armitage looked surprised. "You intend to donate the estate?" "I intend to transform it," Elliot replied. "Every room, every resource, not as a monument to wealth, but as a foundation for future generations." There was no applause, just silence, heavy, reverent, stunned. Caleb let out a quiet, bitter scoff. "You're throwing it all away." "No," Elliot said, meeting his gaze with clarity. "I'm giving it meaning." Then he turned to the lawyer. "And one more thing," he added. "I want to set up a fund, with part of the assets, to help those in this room who might need a second chance, even the ones who misjudged me, even the ones who mocked me." The words landed like thunder. Caleb looked stunned. A few people shifted, confused. One woman from Leonard's legal team stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Why would you do that? After everything they said to you?" Elliot paused, his expression soft but unwavering. "Because kindness isn't a transaction," he said. "It's a choice." In the corner, Riley wiped his eyes. A few of the others from Step Forward leaned on each other, overwhelmed. Even Mr. Armitage, usually stoic, cleared his throat with emotion. "That's highly unusual," he admitted, "but admirable." As the guests slowly began to leave, most in quiet reflection, some in shame, a few lingered, those who had laughed before now uncertain of themselves. Elliot said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence had spoken louder than their cruelty ever could. Near the doorway, the elderly sister of Leonard approached him once more. "You didn't just inherit his wealth," she whispered. "You inherited his wisdom." Elliot gave her a gentle nod, the brim of his old cap still in his hand. Outside, the sky was brighter, the mist had lifted, and as Elliot stepped onto the steps of the estate, a breeze caught the hem of his shirt. Ordinary, worn, but now iconic. He didn't look like someone who had just gained the world. He looked like someone who had never lost himself. There are stories that shout. And then there are stories like Elliot's, quiet, steady, unshakable. The kind that whisper through the noise and settle deep into the soul. What happened in that grand hall wasn't just a twist of fate or a reversal of fortune. It was a mirror held up to a world obsessed with appearance and lineage. A reminder that humility doesn't equate to insignificance, and silence is not the absence of strength. Elliot Marlowe never asked to be seen. He never demanded recognition, and yet he became the embodiment of something most of us forget in our rush to be admired: the power of showing up for others, without a script, without a spotlight, simply because it's the right thing to do. The people who judged him that day weren't villains. They were reflections of what happens when we let status define worth, when we trust clothing over character, when we forget that the greatest wealth a person can offer isn't in assets or last names, but in how they make others feel when no one else is looking. And Elliot, he didn't seek revenge. He didn't respond with cruelty or shame. He responded with grace, with action, with an offering of help, even to those who failed him first. That's what made him great. Not the fortune left behind, not the buildings bearing his new name, but the decision to stay kind in a world that mocked kindness, the strength to remain gentle when anger would have been justified, the courage to build bridges where others only saw walls. There's a piece of Elliot in all of us, or at least, there could be, and maybe that's the real inheritance here. Not money, not power, but the chance to choose a better way, to see past someone's clothes, their silence, their posture, and into the human being waiting to be recognized. So next time you find yourself laughing with the crowd, pause, look again, because the person you're ignoring might be the one carrying the most important lesson you'll ever learn. Before you go, there's one more story I need you to hear. It's just as unforgettable.